Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our TOEFL preparation series. I am so excited to be your instructor today as we tackle the reading section. Specifically, we are looking at the read and academic passage question type. This part of the exam tests your ability to grasp complex concepts and understand how authors organize their ideas. We are going to break down a passage together, piece by piece, so you can learn how to spot the right answers quickly and confidently. Let's get to work. If you're enjoying these lessons, don't forget to subscribe to my TOEFL and join our community of learners. Let's keep working toward your dream score together. Urban Heat Islands. The title of our passage is Urban Heat Islands. This is a very descriptive title. It tells us we will be learning about a specific phenomenon where urban or city areas act like islands of heat. This immediately prepares us to look for information about temperature differences and the reasons why cities might be hotter than the countryside. Pay close attention to these terms as they define the scope of the text. Cities are often warmer than their surrounding rural areas, a phenomenon known as the urban heat island effect. In this first sentence, the author introduces the main topic by defining the urban heat island effect. Notice how it creates a comparison between cities and rural areas. This comparison is the core of the entire passage, so keep it in mind as we read further. This temperature difference occurs because buildings, roads, and other artificial surfaces absorb and retain more heat than natural landscapes. Now we get into the reasons. The author uses the phrase artificial surfaces to explain the cause. These surfaces, like roads, do two things. They absorb and they retain heat. This explains why the temperature stays high compared to natural landscapes. Materials such as asphalt and concrete store solar energy during the day and release it slowly at night, preventing cities from cooling efficiently. Here we have specific examples. The author mentions asphalt and concrete. The key detail here is that they release it slowly at night. This is a classic TOEFL detail. It explains why cities don't cool down, or why they are preventing cities from cooling efficiently. As a result, urban residents may experience higher nighttime temperatures and increased energy demand for air conditioning. The phrase, "as a result," signals a consequence. For people living in cities, this means higher nighttime temperatures. It also leads to a practical problem: increased energy demand, because everyone is turning on their cooling systems. Researchers have measured differences of several degrees Celsius between city centers and nearby countryside, especially during summer months. Finally, the author brings in evidence from researchers. They have found a gap of several degrees Celsius. This effect is most noticeable during the summer months. This sentence adds scientific weight to the claims made earlier. One major factor contributing to this effect is the reduction of vegetation in densely built environments. Paragraph 2 starts with a new point. The reduction of vegetation is identified as a major factor. This happens mostly in densely built environments where there simply isn't much room for plants. Trees and plants provide shade and cool the air through evaporation, but their presence is often limited in highly developed districts. This sentence explains why plants are helpful. They provide shade and evaporation. However, the author notes that in highly developed districts, we don't see them very often. This lack of greenery contributes to the heat. Without these natural cooling mechanisms, heat accumulates and intensifies over time. The author uses the phrase natural cooling mechanisms to refer back to plants. Because they are missing, the heat accumulates. It doesn't just stay the same, it intensifies over time, making the situation worse. In addition, tall buildings can trap warm air between them, creating what scientists describe as an urban canyon that slows wind flow. We have a transition in addition, which means another cause is coming. Tall buildings are the culprits here. They create an urban canyon, which is a great descriptive term that explains how air gets stuck. This configuration can exacerbate heat retention by reducing ventilation and limiting the movement of cooler air masses. This sentence contains our vocabulary word, exacerbate. It describes how the building setup affects heat retention. By reducing ventilation, the buildings make the heat problem much more severe. The consequences of urban heat islands extend beyond discomfort. Paragraph 3 moves on to the consequences. The author says they extend beyond discomfort. This tells us that the issues are serious and extend into other areas of life like health and energy. Higher temperatures can increase health risks, particularly for elderly individuals and those with respiratory conditions. One major consequence is health risks. The author highlights vulnerable groups like elderly individuals and people with respiratory conditions. This shows that heat islands are a public health concern. They also contribute to greater electricity consumption, which may lead to higher emissions from power plants. Another impact is greater electricity consumption. This creates an environmental cycle, leading to higher emissions from power plants. It's a chain reaction of negative effects. To address this issue, urban planners promote solutions such as green roofs, reflective building materials, and expanded public parks. Now we look at the fixes. The phrase, "address this issue," introduces solutions. Planners use things like green roofs and parks to try and cool cities down. These strategies aim to reduce surface temperatures and restore some of the natural cooling processes found in rural areas. The goal of these strategies is to reduce surface temperatures. By doing this, planners hope to restore the cooling effects that are normally found in nature. This brings the passage full circle back to the comparison with rural areas. All right, let's jump into the first question together. This is a big picture question that checks if you understood the passage as a whole. What we need to do here is find the statement that best summarizes the entire text without leaving out the main points. What is the main idea of the passage? This question is asking for the main idea. To find this, we need to look at the passage as a whole. A good tip for reading questions is to look at the introductory sentences of each paragraph. Paragraph 1 defines the effect. Paragraph 2 explains the causes, and paragraph 3 discusses consequences and solutions. The correct answer must cover these structural and environmental factors that the author describes. We are looking for a bird's-eye view of the text. Let's evaluate option A together. Cities experience higher temperatures than rural areas due to structural and environmental factors. This choice says that cities are hotter because of how they are built and their environment. This matches our passage perfectly. We saw this in the very first sentence where the author says cities are warmer than their surrounding rural areas. The rest of the passage then explains the artificial surfaces and reduction of vegetation. Since this option covers the core comparison and the reasons, it is correct. Let's move on to option B. Urban residents prefer living in warmer environments than rural residents. This option claims that people in cities prefer the heat. However, if we look at the text, the author actually mentions that this heat causes discomfort and health risks. The passage never says anything about people's preferences. Because this is not supported by the text, this option is incorrect. Next, we'll examine option C. Air conditioning is the primary cause of rising temperatures in cities. This choice says that air conditioning is the primary cause. But let's check the logic in the passage. Paragraph 1 says that increased energy demand for AC is a result of the heat, not the cause of it. The primary causes are actually asphalt and concrete. Since this option flips the cause and effect, it is incorrect. Now, let's take a closer look at option D. Rural areas are becoming warmer because of urban expansion. This option focuses on rural areas becoming warmer. But wait, the whole passage is about why cities are warmer than their surroundings. It doesn't discuss rural areas warming up. It uses them as a surrounding comparison point. This is a distraction from the main focus, so it is incorrect. The correct answer is A, because the key expressions in the text directly match this option, while the other choices either provide incomplete information or clearly contradict the passage. Moving right along to the second question. Here we have a vocabulary task. We need to look at how a specific word is used in context to find its best synonym. The word exacerbate in paragraph 2 is closest in meaning to This is a vocabulary question focused on the word exacerbate. To solve this, look at its context in paragraph 2. It says that the urban canyon can exacerbate heat retention. We know that trapping heat is a negative thing in this context, and the canyon is reducing ventilation. This tells us the word must mean making a bad situation even worse. A useful tip for these questions is to replace the word with the answer choices and see which one keeps the original meaning. Let's evaluate option A together, reduce. The word reduce means to make something smaller, but the passage says the building configuration limits the movement of cool air, which makes the heat stay. If it makes the heat stay, it isn't reducing the problem, it's increasing it. So this choice is incorrect. Let's move on to option B, measure. The word measure refers to finding the size or amount of something. While researchers might measure temperatures, the sentence about buildings isn't about counting or sizing. It's about the effect they have on heat. It doesn't fit the context of the sentence, making it incorrect. Next, we'll examine option C, worsen. To worsen means to make a situation more severe or bad. If buildings trap air and limit movement of cool air, they are definitely making the heat problem more intense. This matches the negative tone of the paragraph perfectly. Therefore, this option is correct. Now let's take a closer look at option D, observe. The word observe means to watch or notice something. Buildings are physical structures. They don't observe heat retention. They physically cause it to stay. The sentence is about an action affecting a condition, not just noticing it. This makes the choice incorrect. The correct answer to this question is C, since this option alone fully and clearly addresses what the question is asking, highlighting the importance of careful reading. Time for question 3. This is a factual detail question. We need to go back to the first paragraph and find exactly what the text says about a specific situation. According to paragraph 1, why do cities remain warmer at night? This is a detail question. It specifically asks about nighttime temperatures. We need to look at paragraph 1 to find the specific physical reason mentioned. Look for keywords like night or after sunset to find the right sentence. Our goal is to find the cause and effect relationship that happens after the sun goes down. Let's evaluate option A together. Artificial surfaces release stored heat slowly after sunset. This choice perfectly reflects materials such as asphalt and concrete, which store solar energy and then release it slowly at night. This slow release is exactly why the city stays warm while the countryside cools down. Because this is stated directly in the text, it is correct. Let's move on to option B. Rural areas produce more wind during the evening. While the passage mentions that tall buildings slow wind flow in cities, it never claims that rural areas produce more wind in the evening as a reason for the temperature difference. This is an assumption that isn't in paragraph 1, so this option is incorrect. Next, we'll examine option C. Urban residents use more electricity at night. Paragraph 1 does mention an increased energy demand for air conditioning. However, this is described as a result of the high temperatures, not the primary reason why the buildings themselves are releasing heat. The question asks why cities remain warmer, and the physical cause is the material, not the electricity use itself. This makes the choice incorrect. Now, let's take a closer look at option D. Concrete buildings block sunlight during the day. Wait. If buildings block sunlight, that would usually make things cooler. Paragraph 1 actually says that surfaces absorb and retain more heat from the sun. Blocking sunlight isn't the reason given for nighttime warmth. Storing it is. This choice contradicts the passage's logic, so it is incorrect. The correct choice should be marked as A, because the context of the passage supports only this option. The other choices involve surface-level reading or misinterpretation. Let's look at the fourth question. This is an accept question, which means we are acting like detectives. 3 of these options are true, according to the passage, and 1 is not. Our job is to find that one outlier. All of the following are mentioned as causes of urban heat islands, except. For this except question, we need to verify each choice against the text. We are looking for something that is not listed as a cause. A good strategy is to go through the passage and check off each point as you find it. If you can find it in the text, it's not the answer. We want the one that is missing or mentioned as something other than a cause. Let's evaluate option A together: heat-absorbing construction materials. In paragraph 1, the author mentions artificial surfaces, like asphalt and concrete, that absorb and retain more heat. Since this is clearly mentioned as a cause, it cannot be our except answer. This choice is incorrect because it is in the passage. Let's move on to option B, limited vegetation in developed areas. Paragraph 2 explicitly states that a major factor is the reduction of vegetation. It also notes that their presence is often limited. Since this cause is mentioned, it's not our answer. This choice is incorrect. Next, we'll examine option C, tall buildings that reduce airflow. Paragraph 2 also mentions that tall buildings create an urban canyon that slows wind flow. This matches reduce airflow perfectly. Because this is mentioned as a cause of heat retention, it's not the correct answer for an except question. This choice is incorrect. Now, let's take a closer look at option D, increased rainfall in metropolitan regions. Scanning the text for rainfall or precipitation, nothing. The passage discusses heat, materials, buildings, and plants, but it never mentions increased rainfall as a cause or even a factor of heat islands. Since this is the only one not in the text, it is our correct answer. Here, the correct option is D, which shows that once we understand the main idea of the text, identifying the correct answer becomes much more straightforward. We have reached the final question. This one asks about the relationship between two paragraphs. We need to think about the organization of the passage and how the author transitions from one set of ideas to the next. What is the relationship between paragraphs 2 and 3? This question focuses on the relationship between paragraph 2 and paragraph 3. Think about the function of each paragraph. Paragraph 2 lists causes like lack of plants and tall buildings. Paragraph 3 starts by talking about consequences and ends by discussing solutions. We need an answer that captures this flow from causes to impacts and fixes. Let's evaluate option A together. Paragraph 3 questions the explanation presented in paragraph 2. To question an explanation means to doubt it or say it might be wrong. However, paragraph 3 actually builds on the previous paragraph by showing how those heat factors affect people and the environment. It doesn't disagree at all. Because there is no conflict between the paragraphs, this option is incorrect. Let's move on to option B. Paragraph 3 presents the historical background of ideas in paragraph 2. A historical background would involve dates, past events, or how the heat island effect was first discovered. Paragraph 3 is about the present and future, focusing on health risks and solutions like green roofs. It isn't about history, so this choice is incorrect. Next, we'll examine option C. Paragraph 3 explains the consequences and possible solutions related to factors described in paragraph 2. This is a perfect summary of the transition. Paragraph 2 describes the factors, like vegetation and buildings. Then, paragraph 3 moves into the consequences for health and energy, and concludes with possible solutions, like public parks. This describes the logical structure of the text accurately, so it is correct. Now let's take a closer look at option D. Paragraph 3 focuses only on rural development policies. Paragraph 3 mentions rural areas only as a comparison for natural cooling processes. The main focus remains on urban planners and city solutions. It definitely doesn't focus only on rural policies. This choice is too narrow and misses the point, making it incorrect. The correct answer to this question is C, since this option alone fully and clearly addresses what the question is asking, highlighting the importance of careful reading.